A man named Martin Bohm is at work in an airport. He is taking a box of lost and found items from a man. Suddenly, a phone inside the box starts ringing. Another man on the phone tells Martin that he needs his phone immediately.
I just need it back, okay?
Meanwhile, Martin's own phone rings and he receives a call from his son's school. He puts the other phone down and, while distracted, leaves it on a luggage conveyor belt and leaves. Martin rushes to his son Jake, who has climbed an electric tower. While sitting at the top, Jake is writing something in his notebook. Martin talks Jake into coming down. Jake is an autistic kid who does not talk to anybody. A worker tells Martin that it is Jake's third time doing this at exactly 3:18 p.m. and that he will report this to Child Services.
You know I'm gonna have to report him to Child Services this time.
In the next scene, Martin and Jake are sitting in the car when Jake suddenly jumps out and runs away. Seeing this, Martin runs after him. Jake stops near a school bus and notes down the number 318 written on its back. Later, they stop at a store to grab an orange soda. There, Jake looks at a man who is buying a lottery ticket. Jake snatches the ticket from the man and runs to the car. After that, he locks himself in his car. The man is yelling at Jake to give him back his lottery ticket. Martin also asks Jake to open the door. However, Jake opens the door after noting down the numbers on the lottery ticket. Martin takes the ticket and gives it back to the man. After taking the ticket, the man punches Martin and leaves. At night, the same man is seen sticking his lottery ticket on his bedroom wall that is full of lottery tickets already attached. At home, Martin puts Jake to bed. In his room, Jake has placed several phones in his notebook on the floor. Martin is about to leave the room when suddenly all these phones start ringing together. Martin looks at the phones in Jake's notebook. The number that is calling is the same on each phone.
How did you do that?
It is also the same number written by Jake in his notebook that he copied earlier from the lottery ticket. Martin is amazed to see how Jake can do this. The next morning, someone knocks at Martin's door. He opens the door and sees a lady. She tells Martin that her name is Clea Hopkins, and she is here from Child and Family Services to do an assessment on Jake.
Clea Hopkins, Child and Family Services.
Martin lets her in and she proceeds to tell Martin that his unstable lifestyle with multiple jobs and numerous school transfers with no mother at home does not look very promising for Jake's well-being and that she is here to help offer solutions. Here, we get to know that Jake's mother used to work in the North Tower of the World Trade Center and that she died on September 11th. Martin tells Clea that he can take care of Jake, but Clea does not seem convinced. She goes to meet Jake and Martin warns her not to touch Jake because Jake does not let anyone touch him. Later, while looking at his newspaper, Martin gets shocked and rushes to Jake's bedroom. Martin matches the numbers of the lottery ticket winner in the newspaper to the number in Jake's notebook that he wrote yesterday. Both numbers are the same. Martin tells Clea that last night, all these phones got a call from this same number at the same time. Clea tells Martin that it may be just a coincidence. Meanwhile,
Autistic children often have a heightened
ability with numbers.
the man from whom Jake snatched the lottery ticket yesterday is seen coming out of his shower. He watches the news on the TV and realizes that he has won the jackpot. On the other hand, Martin tries to convince Clea that Jake is trying to tell him something by writing and coming up with number 318 again and again. Clea tells Martin that it is only due to a lack of human connection with Jake that Martin is trying to find meaning in random numbers. Clea convinces Martin to send Jake to a care facility for a 2-week evaluation for its board to decide whether Jake should stay with his father or not. In the next scene, we see Martin and Jake sitting in the care facility. Martin tells Jake that it is only for 2 weeks and that he will come to visit him every day. After that, Martin gives Clea the box of lost and found items that he got yesterday for Jake and leaves. We see Martin sitting at his work computer, trying to find a connection between autism and cell phones. He happens to look at a website. On this website, he sees the name of a teller institute with an address at the end starting with street number 318. Martin goes to the address. He rings the bell, only to see an old man open the door. Martin tells this man that he is looking for the Teller Institute. Seeing the old man confused, Martin thinks that he is at the wrong address and turns around to leave. As Martin is leaving, the old man asks him if his son keeps climbing the cell tower. Listening to this, Martin stops and turns around. Then the old man tells Martin to come inside.
Your kid keeps climbing a cell tower.
The old man is Professor Arthur Teller. He talks about the Fibonacci sequence and that the universe is made up of precise ratios and patterns where every action, thought, and breath is connected to each other. He tells Martin that Jake can see the past, present, and future and sees how everything is connected. He further tells Martin that it is a road map, and his purpose now is to follow it for Jake. Meanwhile, Jake is sitting in his facility with Clea and spells out a number with his popcorn. Clea is surprised to see that the number is the same as her mother's cell phone number. Suddenly, her phone rings, and she receives a call from this same number, but no one speaks on the other side. Later, Martin is at home trying to figure out the meaning of the number. He figures out the number to be of a telephone located at a train station. Clea reaches Martin's home and tells him that 318 is today's date, meaning March 18th. Martin tells Clea that Jake is trying to tell them about something through numbers that is going to happen today at 3:18 p.m., 22 minutes from now, at the station, and they will happen to stop it from happening. So they rush to the station and start locating the telephone. Martin calls the number and a telephone starts ringing. He hurries to this phone, but a man comes and starts using the phone. The time is now 3:18. Martin tells this man that he needs to use this phone right now. The man turns around. It happens to be the same man from whom Jake had snatched the lottery ticket. Seeing this man, Martin punches him for revenge, and they start fighting. Later that night, Martin is at home and listens to a voice message on his phone. A man named Randall Mead is telling him that he worked as a fireman in Ladder Company 318, and on September 11th, he carried Martin's wife, Sarah, down 31 flights of stairs. He says that after he got tired, he left Sarah and ran away to save his own life. Randall tells Martin that he has been using the numbers of that day to buy a lottery ticket for the last 10 years, and today, he has won millions of dollars. Suddenly, Martin hears his own voice on the phone, asking Randall to let him use the phone. He realizes that Randall is the same man who got into a fight with him at the station. While on the phone, he hears breaking news on TV. He goes to the TV to see that a retired fireman, Randall Mead, has saved the lives of children by pulling them out of a burning bus that has a number 318 written on its back. Randall is telling the reporter that if he had not missed his train, he would not have been able to save these children. Later that day, Martin goes to Jake's facility to meet him. There he tells Clea that Jake predicted everything that has happened. However, Clea tells Martin that Jake is missing. At this, Martin tells her that he knows where Jake might be. They go to the cell tower that Jake climbed earlier and find him sitting at the top. Martin climbs and comes near to Jake. He tells Jake that he hears him now. Jake takes Martin's phone and types a number. Martin calls the number and tells the person on the phone that they are supposed to find each other.
My name is Martin Baum. Look.
The next morning, Clea comes to Martin's home to take Jake to the facility. Martin tells her that Jake is finally communicating with him and shows her the number that Jake dialed last night on the cell tower. He tells her that he must find this guy now, but still, Clea does not let Jake stay and takes him with her. Before leaving, Jake writes the same phone number in Martin's hand. At the airport, Martin uses the reverse phone directory to check the number and finds that it belongs to Arnie's pawn shop. Martin's boss assigns him a special delivery of a dog named Liev to Moscow, leaving in 30 minutes. Martin drives Liev but is intercepted by a flight attendant who tells him that now she is supposed to deliver Liev. When she turns around, she sees Liev running away, and so she runs to catch him. In the facility, we see Clea watching Jake write 5,296 repeatedly in his notebook. She tries to distract him with popcorn, but it does not work. Clea gives him finger paint, which he uses to write 5296 on a canvas. Clea gets up to grab something to clean Jake's hand and turns around to find that Jake has left the room. Jake heads to a door marked 6 and presses his paint-stained hand against it. Clea goes after Jake only to find a locked exit door there. She writes 5296 on the keypad and is shocked to see it work and open the door. In the next scene, we see Martin with a piece of paper on which Arnie's pawn shop's address is written. He reaches the location and enters the shop. Martin tells Arnie that he is the one who called him last night and told him that they were supposed to find each other. Arnie asks Martin for the reason he is here. Martin tells him that he does not know yet. Arnie seems to think that Martin is a lunatic. Suddenly, the door opens, and a masked man with a gun enters the shop. He demands money from Arnie, but Arnie refuses. Martin tries to help and jumps at the robber. The robber shoots Arnie in the shoulder and escapes. An ambulance arrives, and Arnie reluctantly goes to the hospital. He tells Martin to stay away from him. Martin goes to Teller and tells him everything that he did and asks him what he is supposed to do now. Teller tells him that Jake can see the whole universe in numbers, and when the numbers don't add up, it means that there is some cosmic pain that Jake feels and that needs to be healed. He tells Martin that his son sees the pain as numbers and it's his job to follow blindly wherever it leads. Suddenly, Martin's phone rings, and Clea tells him that Jake is gone. Martin spots Jake at a bus stop and goes after the bus that Jake is on. Martin stops the bus and asks Jake to get off, but he does not move. The bus starts again, and after a while, they both get off at a station. Jake takes Martin to Arnie's pawn shop. Martin calls Arnie but hears the phone ringing in the apartment on top of the shop. They go inside the apartment, and Martin sees a letter written by Arnie addressed to Rebecca, who is Arnie's daughter. Meanwhile, Jake points to a bat with the number 5296 written on it. The landlord enters the apartment and considers Martin, the man to whom he is supposed to give an envelope, as asked by Arnie. He mentions Arnie's cancer and the fact that Arnie knew that he wouldn't be coming back to his apartment for a while. So that man goes to grab the envelope. Soon Martin realizes that Arnie had planned a hit to kill himself. The landlord comes and gives Martin an envelope full of cash and gets a hint that Martin is not the man who is supposed to take the envelope. He attacks Martin, but Martin uses the bat, pointed at by Jake earlier, to save himself, and they run out of the apartment and get in a taxi. In the taxi, Jake gives Arnie's medicine to Martin. Martin tells the driver to take them to a hospital, the name of which was written on Arnie's medicine. After reaching the hospital, they go to room 5296 only to find it empty. Jake points to Arnie, who is walking away on a bridge in his hospital gown. So, they rush to Arnie. Arnie is about to jump when Martin and Jake arrive. Martin tells Arnie to stop, but he tells Martin that he has nothing worth living for. Martin tells him to think about his daughter, Rebecca. Arnie says that Rebecca does not want her father in her life. Arnie is about to jump when Martin grabs him and pulls him back. Suddenly, the dog Liev is seen coming towards them, and the flight attendant is still running after Liev. The flight attendant sees her father lying on the bridge, and suddenly, everything starts to make sense. In the next scene, Arnie is lying on the hospital bed with his daughter sitting beside him. And at night, Martin puts Jake to bed, saying that he has much to learn from Jake. The following day, we see Martin sleeping on his sofa. He gets a call from Jake's facility. He picks up the phone, but no one speaks on the other end. He thinks that Jake called him, and he rushes to his facility. In the facility, he meets Clea, who tells him he can't barge in any time he wants. Martin tells her that Jake is finally communicating with him through numbers and that she can see it too. Clea says she understands, but Jake's way of communicating through numbers will not look very promising to the board, and they will take Jake away from him. They go to Jake's room only to find it empty. After some time, they find Jake sitting on the floor writing 3287 repeatedly in his notebook. Clea takes Jake back to his room, and while leaving, Jake puts a piece of paper that has a dragon's photo on it in Martin's jacket. In the next scene, we see Martin walking on the sidewalk when a homeless woman gets hit by a car in front of him. Martin is trying to help her when a man steals a notebook from her bag and runs away. Seeing this, Martin starts to chase the robber. Soon, Martin catches the robber, but the robber claims that the notebook is his. Martin opens it to find the number 3287 written repeatedly on it. Martin tells the robber that the book is just like his son's book and asks him who he is. The robber tells Martin that he is the Invisible Prince. Martin shows him the dragon's photo and asks him if he knows what it means. Invisible Prince tells him that it means that the dragon is loose. Martin tells him that his son Jake sees patterns and numbers and asks the prince if he can see the patterns, too. Listening to this, the prince tells Martin that he can also see patterns and numbers. Martin says that Jake might need Prince's help. The prince tells Martin that Jake only wants his father to stop the pain that he feels by following Jake's roadmap. When Martin asks about the dragon, the prince tells him that he has the only magic sword powerful enough to kill it, but he always tries and fails. He tells Martin that he offered his sword to the king, but he buried it behind a wall of stones. He further tells Martin that the final battle is tonight, but he can't touch the sword. Later, Martin sees a building with a giant dragon on it and enters it. The building is a big investment firm named Morton Starling. He overhears two women talking about a Roger King and his lawsuit against a firm named Morton Starling. He tries to sneak into their meeting, posing as a lawyer. However, a reporter approaches Martin just then and asks him if he can get Roger King for an interview. He gives Martin the address of Roger King with 3287 written on it. So, Martin goes to King's address and tells him he wants to talk to him about his suit against Morton Starling. Roger tells him to leave, but when Martin asks him about the Invisible Prince, he lets Martin in. Inside the house, Martin meets Roger King, who explains that his brother Walter King was a numbers genius and worked for Morton Starling, but later, he disappeared. He tells Martin that the invisible prince is from a story their father used to tell in their childhood. Roger tells Martin that his brother Walter convinced their father and others to invest in Morton Sterling's investment scheme that Walter had helped to develop. However, Morton Sterling used a loophole in the investment scheme of Walter to defraud millions. Rogers tells Martin that Walter considered himself responsible for the loss of their father's money and the money of those who had invested in Morton Sterling after being convinced by Walter. That's why Walter vanished after that. Listening to the whole story, Martin concludes that the invisible prince is actually Walter King himself. Then, Martin asks Roger about the sword, but he does not know anything about it. He says his father only left behind a few boxes which Martin asks to see. In the box, Martin finds a locked safe. He uses the code 3287 to open it and sees a sealed envelope. Martin opens the envelope to find some documents. When Roger asks Martin what that is, he tells him it's the magic sword of truth and then leaves. Meanwhile, Teller goes to Jake's facility and asks the director, Sherry, an old acquaintance, for a visit. The director tells him that he shouldn't be here after what happened to his last patient. While they are talking, Jake, sitting in the room, starts screaming. On the other hand, Martin goes to the reporter who gave him King's address and gives him the evidence stating that Morton Sterling willingly defrauded their clients and that Walter King was innocent in the whole story. So, the reporter immediately calls the lawyer representing the plaintiffs. At night, Martin is seen putting Jake to bed in the facility. The following day, Martin is having lunch with Clea and Jake. Clea says that she is happy to see Jake bonding well with his father. She tells him that today is the first of a series of evaluations to determine Jake's custody.
They can't make an assessment of Jake's situation unless they see his bond with...
Clea also mentions that Martin and Jake's pics, together with the things his Aunt Abigail sent over, make a strong case for Martin. Martin tells Clea that after Sarah died, her sister Abigail tried to take Jake away from him. Mentioning Jake's mother upsets Jake, and he knocks things off the table. While leaving, Jake places his hand on the window to make a circular pattern, and when Martin looks under his table, he sees the same pattern made from sugar packets. In the next scene, we see Martin consulting Teller about the pattern. Martin tells him that he just needs to be a good father for Jake right now and should not go after chasing the numbers. Teller tells him that he can be a good father to Jake only by following his roadmap.
The best thing for Jake is for you to follow his roadmap.
Teller talks to him about the golden ratio and tells him that there are 22 points in a circle. He tells Martin that Jake is progressing and that he wants to convey the number 22 to him by drawing a circular pattern. Later that day, Martin is trying to pick up some oranges that he dropped when a pickpocket steals his computer. Martin chases him onto a bus, but the thief escapes. He sits next to a woman whose bag has the same pattern on it that Jake made earlier. Suddenly, the woman pulls a gun on him. Just then, Clea calls Martin, concerned about his absence during the evaluation. So, Martin tells the gunwoman that he has to be somewhere important and that she does not have to kill anyone. The woman tells Martin about a man on the bus who she intends to kill. She tells him that this man killed her father and brother and today she is going to take her revenge.
I watched your head explode.
Martin says that if she kills this man today, then the killer is the one who wins. He says that her father would never want her to become a killer. However, the woman's intentions don't change, and she tells Martin that she has nothing to lose. The bus suddenly stops, allowing Martin to warn the man targeted by the woman and get off the bus. They go into an alley where Martin tells this man, who has a tattoo of Exodus 22 on his chest, everything that he heard from that woman. The man grabs Martin, and suddenly, the woman arrives and pulls a gun on them. However, they are interrupted by the sound of firecrackers that cause the woman to run into the street, and she gets hit by a truck accidentally. Seeing this, Martin takes her to a hospital. From the hospital, Martin calls Clea, who informs him that the psychologists have left and that the evaluation is over. Martin is trying to figure out the meaning of the tattoo Exodus 22. He finds out that it's a Bible quote that states that we should not take advantage of the children whose fathers have died.
Children whose fathers have died.
At night, Martin goes to the address of the man from the bus and asks him about his tattoo. The man tells Martin that he killed many people in the name of his country while following orders, meaning he was once in the army. He says that one time, in a village, he killed many men but could not kill the children and took them to a local church, where they assured him to send those children to Canada. Among those children, maybe the brother of that woman would be present, and that's why she now wants to take revenge for him. as her father was already dead. Hearing all this, Martin runs to the hospital to tell the woman that her brother might still be alive. After reaching the hospital, Martin sees a request for a bone marrow donor from a hospital in Canada for a person who belongs to the same village as the woman from the bus. He goes to her room and tells her that her brother might still be alive and in need of a bone marrow transplant. Martin tells her that fate brought her brother back for a reason. Later, after their DNA is matched, it proves that they are really siblings. Finally, Martin goes to Jake's facility where Clea informs him that the board is planning to move Jake to another facility that meets Jake's needs. Clea asks Martin to stop following the roadmap all the time and hands him a box that Jake's and Abigail had left for Jake. The following day, Professor Teller calls Martin to his home and tells him that the numbers that Jake has given to his father so far are not new and that he is following a pattern called the Amelia sequence, named after his previous patient Amelia, and shows the sequence to Martin. Teller tells him that he, too, had a grasp of the number's knowledge for a short while but could not hold onto it. Martin sees the next number, 975, in Amelia's sequence that Jake has not given him yet. Teller asks Martin if he can meet Jake, but Martin refuses and leaves. Later, we see Teller take out his old visitor's card from Jake's facility from his drawer. Later that day, Martin goes to a man's house to deliver a lost bag from the airport. While signing the receipt, Martin comes to know that this man has lost his little boy. On the other hand, Teller goes to Jake's facility secretly and tries to meet Jake without permission. There, he sees Jake writing 975 on a canvas. Meanwhile, Clea gets a call from a hospital, and a lady from the psych ward on the phone call tells Clea that her mother has been admitted there. That's why Clea immediately reaches the hospital, and a nurse tells her that the police caught her mother shoplifting. She tells the nurse that her mother is schizophrenic and lives on the street. The nurse says that they can provide her mother with a bed in the ward if her mother gives consent. Clea goes to her mother and tells her that she is her daughter and asks her to stay in the hospital. However, her mother says that her baby is at home and runs away from the hospital. After her mother runs away, Clea asks the nurse if her mother is trying to steal anything. The nurse tells her that it was a cough syrup. Clea tells the nurse that once, her mother tried to take someone's kid from a playground. Suddenly, Martin arrives there for a delivery of some stuff and meets Clea. While standing there, they see news on TV about a missing boy named Andy, whose mother is telling the reporter that Andy is wearing a red cap and that he has a cold and cough. Martin sees that it's the same man to whom he delivered a package earlier in the morning. Seeing the news, Clea tells Martin that her mother might have taken that kid.
I think my mother might have taken that child.
Meanwhile, at the facility, Teller is asking Jake if his previous patient, Amelia, is here in the facility, but Jake throws a toy car in a corner, and Teller goes to get it. The director of the facility, Sherry, comes looking for Teller after finding out that Teller has entered the facility without permission, but Teller hides in the corner. After she leaves, Teller comes forward, and he sees that Jake has added a 6 and number 975 on canvas. He goes to room number 6 only to find it empty. In the hallway, he sees Amelia for a second in a wheelchair, but suddenly she disappears and Sherry reaches there with guards. Teller turns around to find that Amelia is gone. They searched the whole facility but could not find any signs of Amelia. Sherry tells him that he is still chasing ghosts, but Teller realizes that Sherry is part of a large conspiracy and leaves. In the parking lot, Teller gets in his car and starts to see the number 9,756 on its meter. In the next scene, we see Clea telling the police about her mother's disappearance. Martin is with her, and he receives a text about an Amber Alert with case number 975 written in it. He realizes that they will have to find the mother on their own. They go to a building where they think that the mother might be present, but the worker there tells them that the building is about to be demolished in 10 minutes. Martin and Clea go inside the building and find a red cap and the mother there. Clea asks her mother where she has kept the boy. She convinces her mother that the boy is not her child, but she is. The mother tells her that she lost the boy in a park 2 blocks away from the building. Martin asks Clea to take her mother out of the building, and he himself runs away to find the boy. After some time, he finds the boy hiding in the park. In the next scene, we see Martin sitting in the facility, and Clea comes to him to thank him for his help. She tells him that he was right about always wanting to chase the numbers. They go to Jake's room where he is writing 9,756 in his notebook repeatedly. Martin finds it odd to see that Jake is still writing and has added 6, 2, at the end of 975. Suddenly, they hear a commotion outside. When they go to the parking lot, they find Teller dead in his car. After that, we see Clea and Martin in the facility's office examining the security footage of Teller before he died. They find out that there is a suspicious gap in the footage when Teller reaches room number 6. In the footage, they also see Teller giving Jake something. So, they go to Jake's room and ask him what Teller gave him. Jake shows them Teller's visitor card and a key with the number 1188 on it. In the next scene, Martin goes to Teller's home. He sees Teller's daughter already there. He tells her that he got a key from Teller, but she tells him that it's not the house key. She tells Martin that she was her father's assistant, and she saw him lose everything when he got obsessed with numbers and patterns. Martin points to the key and tells her that he thinks Teller wants him to access all his research. The daughter tells Martin that her father did not keep any of his research at home. She tells about a basement where her father used to go and that Martin might find his research there. She asks Martin to go and try the key there,